Okay, so we finally know what the suspension is going to be. It's official. It can't change. The appeal cannot be appealed anymore unless the player. Well, it's not going to be appealed because this isn't a ruling. This is a deal made between both the NFL and Deshaun Watson, well, the NFL and the NFLPA on the behalf of Deshaun Watson on the suspension. What is the suspension? It's a very weird number. It's 11 games. 11 games. We'll get into what that means for the Browns season coming up, but let's just get all the details out there right now about the suspension. I did a live stream once this really first broke, but I wanted to wait to make the official video about it just so I can catch all of the smaller details that are going to come up about the suspension as time goes on. But here it is. It's an 11-game suspension, $5 million fine for Deshaun Watson. I think separate of that, the Browns are also donating a certain amount of money to Northeastern Ohio. Let me see what let's pull up the report so I don't misquote and get in trouble here. But this is basically what it says. Deshaun Watson of the Cleveland Browns will be suspended without pay for the first 11 games of 2022 in a $5 million violation for the NFL's personal conduct policy. It was announced in addition, Watson will promptly undergo professional evaluation by behavior experts and will follow their treatment program. The announcement comes after an agreement reached by the NFL and the NFLPA and concludes the disciplinary process. Watson's fines and contributions from the NFL and the Browns of $1 million. So the Browns will give another $1 million each, will create a fund of $7 million. So the NFL is giving one. The Browns, as a franchise, are giving $1 million, and Deshaun Watson is giving $5 million. Well, is being fined. He's not giving; he's being fined $5 million. So in a way, he's giving, but it's not because he wants to, or is doing it on his own will. It's because he's forced to in this situation, or agreed to is the better term for it. The fund will support the work of local nonprofit organizations across the country, educate young people on healthy relationships, promote education and prevention of misconduct, assault, and support survivors and related causes. Deshaun has been committed to doing the hard work himself that is necessary for a return to the NFL. Commissioner Goodell stated. This settlement in compliance with the professional evaluation and treatment plan, a significant fine, and a more substantial suspension. We are grateful for Judge Robinson and Peter Harvey for their efforts, which led to the foundation of teaching this conclusion. Okay. So that's a statement from the NFL. The Browns did a press conference. That thing's a mess. I'm just going to keep it straight with you. I don't care what you think of this whole situation. The thing was a mess. They had like 8 different talking points. It was not organized. The Browns did not come off good in that press conference. Deshaun Watson, I don't think, came off good in that press conference. It was a disaster from a PR standpoint. So you can go watch that on your own accord. I'm just going to let that be what it is. I'm not going to lie about it. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But we've come to expect this with Jimmy Haslam. I mean, there have been far less controversial things in which Jimmy Haslam and the people that he trusts in this PR circle have really made things worse when they didn't need to get worse. There are multiple situations we could point to in the past with the Browns, like firing coaches, a Hugh Jackson situation. Like, it didn't take something of this magnitude for the Browns to have a PR bungle, but, you know, they had one. At this point, it's so regular, I don't even know how to react to it. I just don't react to it at this point. But yeah, that's out there if you want to see it. If you want to see how you feel about it, maybe you don't think it's a disaster, that's on you. I felt like it was a very awkward hour of press conferences to sit through. But hey, man, doesn't really change anything because things can't be appealed at this point. So that is that. The news is that, again, 11-game suspension, $5 million fine for Deshaun Watson, which lighter than what people expected, right? People were coming in at 12, indefinite suspension, all of these things. Also, Stefanski has confirmed that Deshaun Watson will not play in the final 2 preseason games. I have to think this has to do with them wanting to protect the health of the offensive line. They don't want to have him, since there's a chance of him playing behind a second team offensive line, right? Because you don't want him to get an injury that prevents him from coming back this season, regardless of whatever the suspension was. And you don't want to risk an injury like what happened to Nick Harris when he was out there and he got hurt. So, I think the Browns feel confident. I think this point needs to be repeated when it comes to Deshaun Watson and the concerns about the rust. Did those 2 drives that he was in last week, were they rusty? Yeah, they were absolutely rusty. But do I think that that's going to be something that lasts more than like a few quarters? I don't think so, right? I think even at the end of that last drive when he made that throw to Anthony Schwartz, he started to feel more comfortable. I think there were a lot of factors that happened in those 3 drives, because Dearness Johnson fumbled at the immediate start of one, that made it hard for him to fall into the rhythm of a game. I think that was a 4-quarter game. By the 4th quarter, he would have probably been fine. We've seen quarterbacks put together 2 terrible drives before. That doesn't mean that they're so rusty it's going to take like 8 weeks for them to shake off. So I think they feel internally he's not that rusty, and that he'll be all right from what they've seen in practices and in these joint practice situations, that he will have enough intense snaps to be able to come on and be somewhat of an impactful player on day one. So that is the news from that angle of it. There's also a part in here from Adam Schefter I want to bring up. Let me pull it up here. So here is the part from Adam Schefter who says this. I'm sorry, it's not fitting right. Deshaun Watson has to comply with eval and treatment recommendations of a third-party behavioral expert to be reinstated. His reinstatement is contingent upon his compliance with the treatment plan. If he does not comply, his reinstatement could be delayed, plus further discipline. Basically, what I think this means is they're going to give him a program, right? Not too dissimilar to a 12-step program where you have to complete these steps in order to finish it. And they believe that these steps can be completed between August 30th and the start of week 13. So, this in November 11th is when he's eligible to practice again. So I believe that program will probably last from there to there. If he does everything that's required of him in that program, he will be allowed to return to the facility. This is not that dissimilar to when we had these things go on with like a Josh Gordon, where he would be in a drug treatment program and he had to finish that program before he could come back to the team. It's usually not an issue. I think in Josh's case, it was an issue a couple of times, but we're dealing with, so that could be a problem, but I don't really anticipate it. Again, he should comply. He should not be resistant to this. This is something that he agreed to. So ultimately, at the end of the day, he's probably going to finish the program and everything else and do all that stuff that's required of him. Now, what does this mean for the season, right? I've seen all kind of proclamations on what this means for the Cleveland Browns upcoming season. Well, I think the number to watch here, right? If we're talking about 11 games, what does that mean? I think we have 3 numbers to look for, right? When it comes to what Jacoby Brissett can accomplish. It's 5, it's 6, and it's 7. Now, why do I say 5, 6, and 7? If you get to 5 wins, you have a chance to make the playoffs this year, right? Last 6 games of the season, they're not that difficult, right? I mean, we're talking about Houston, who we don't expect to be great, Cincinnati, where the Browns just tend to be a different team for whatever reason, Baltimore at home. So if you're going to play Baltimore, at least you play them at home. New Orleans, which is a very winnable game, and that is, again, at home. And then you play the Washington Commanders. You should be able to win that game. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I don't project to be a very good team this year. I think they'll be a good team, but not like a great team. They're going to be probably like a 500 team, and Browns should be able to beat 500 teams. By 500 win percentage teams, you know what I mean? So that is not the most tough gauntlet for him to come back on, That game against Houston is interesting, right? Because, boy, that's going to be an environment, right? And it's going to be interesting how he responds to it. From my experience, in those kind of hostile environments, either guys completely shrink or they just eat the moment. Deshaun's been somebody in like clutch situations in his career, and this is the closest thing that's been able to just like take the moment. So I wouldn't expect him to shrink under that, but I have no idea how he's going to react to that. Right? LeBron had a similar thing in when he left for Miami, had that crazy game in Cleveland, and he put up like 50, 20, and 10. So it could affect him, but I don't expect it to. But the ideal here for the Browns, when you look at this schedule, is 5 wins gets you 5 wins, keeps you in the conversation. 6, you're comfy, right? Because that means, I think the magic number for the season is 10. That means in those last 6 games, all you got to do is go 4-2. It's very doable, right? If you get to 5, you need to go 5-1 in those last 6 games. If you get to 7, you comfy. You might be able to win the division if you get to 7, right? So 5 and 6 are the numbers you need for the wild card. When it comes to wins in the first 11 weeks of the season, 5 and 6, that is the magic number. If you get to 7, you're sitting pretty. You could win a division. And how can you get to 5 or 6 wins? Well, I think these first 4 weeks are very winnable games here. Carolina, I think that's a winnable game. And that's probably the best quarterback you're going to play is one you're most familiar with in Baker Mayfield, so you have an advantage there. The New York Jets, they're playing a backup. The Pittsburgh Steelers are playing somebody who was a backup last season. The Atlanta Falcons were playing somebody who was a backup last season. And you feel like outside the quarterback position, if we weren't adding that factor in with Jacoby Brissett, and I could say that Jacoby Brissett's probably better than, I would say at least, Joe Flacco at this point, then the Browns are a better team, clearly, than those 3. So those are the 4 wins that, like, you don't want to waste any of those games because it gets harder to get your wins back after that. But that's just 4, right? The magic number is 5, 6, and 7. Where can you get 5, 6, or 7? Well, New England, Cincinnati on Monday night, because, again, you just match up well defensively against them, and Miami. I think those are the 3 opportunities that you can see, right? If they only win those 4 and they don't get more, they're in trouble. They got to get one of those 3. If you get 2 of those 3, you feel good. If you get 3 of those 3, you're in the clear, right? But that is what the gauntlet will be. That is what I think the magic number will be. If you're asking me what I think Jacoby Brissett's stats are going to look like in this time, I would say, what would I say? About 2,000-something yards, about 2,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and probably 6 or 7 wins. I would go 6 wins. I think he gets to 6. I think 5 is pushing. Like, that's the baseline. I think he gets to 5, though. I think it's very realistic to get to 5. But 7 is the max. I don't think you get any more than 7 in that 11 game stretch. But that is the situation here with the whole Deshaun Watson suspension. It's all over to an extent. But that is it. He is suspended 11 games. We know that's going to happen. There's nothing else to debate here as far as the suspension goes. There's nothing more that can happen unless he has more cases pop up, which then he's probably not going to be in the NFL anymore at that point. So, given everything we know now, that's it. It's over. Deshaun Watson is suspended 11 games. We'll see what that means going forward for this team. But y'all have a great day. Have a good night.